Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming to this panel this morning, and thank you for coming to SERA. My name is Ajai Ahluwalia. My day job is the head of supply chain at Renewable UK. And for the largest part of my career, I've designed, built and operated offshore wind farms and energy storage systems and grid connections as an electrical engineer. I'm here this morning very much in my role as an executive member for SERA. Very proud to be doing that, and we're really happy to see such a large audience and varied audience of people coming to a whole series of events ranging from energy through to nature, climate and the environment as well. So thank you very much for turning up this morning. Got a wonderful panel this morning of people from different parts of the sector exploring this topic of, as we've entitled it, bridging the divide, very much focusing on that just transition story. I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves momentarily. Just to say that we are expecting Sarah Boyack, and apologies for when she comes in, which will be stage right, I think. So we'll crack on with it. I appreciate you're all very busy. So I'll start with my left. So Adam, would you like to just introduce yourself and say a few words?
Yeah, I'm Adam Scorer. I'm from fuel poverty charity National Energy Action. So we do crisis support for people in the depths of fuel poverty. I think the question is the right one. The missions are critical. So, for instance, the profile of the 9 million people that government says are in fuel poverty in England is huge, and it's changing. So, 50% working age kind of populations, more than 50%, 70% have health conditions that are caused by, made worse by, made more difficult to solve because they live in cold and damp homes. 50% of our clients have dependent children, 25% under 5. So you're talking about housing missions, you're talking about health missions, you're talking about child poverty missions, and you're talking about the low carbon transition, as if the low carbon transition wasn't complex enough with so many moving parts. My major thing, there is no pathway to net zero that doesn't pass through the homes of the poor. We need to be more courageous about focusing on those people who suffer the most from the current energy crisis. And that's not having hot meals, that's not washing their children's clothes, that's only living in one room, that's going to bed at dusk, that's not having their loved ones around for sociability. So when we think about bridging that divide in the low carbon transition, you have to think not just about the vested interests that have a word to say, you have to think about those people who are silent and are suffering, and that's an exam question for Labour. And if it fails it, you do not have a just transition, you do not have a transition at all. So I think the politics of today, the politics of this government, the politics of the Warm Homes Plan has to start from that position. That is your exam question. That is the one you need to answer.
Thank you, Adam. Katrina, would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words?
Thank you. So I'm Katrina, I work for Centrica, and I'm also one of the national lead trade union reps for GMB. I've worked in the energy sector for 30 years. And when most people picture the energy sector, they think of high-vis jackets, hard hats, tools, but there's also another backbone of that industry, which is the thousands of staff working behind the scenes that keep everything running, and that's who I'm here to represent and hopefully be a voice of. As Adam said, we've got millions of homes in poverty, fuel poverty at the moment, and it's my members that have those difficult conversations with them. There's increased pressure on our contact centre staff. They're having very emotional conversations working from home in their own homes with customers that just cannot afford to pay their bills. However, just because they work for the energy sector, they're not immune to that either. They're facing their own struggles. Throughout my 30 years in the sector, obviously I've seen an enormous amount of change, but I believe moving the energy sector into net zero is going to be the most far-reaching yet for the workers that I represent. There are approximately 1.5 million people working either directly or indirectly in the industry. So when we talk about a just transition, it's not just about big infrastructure projects or new kit, it's about the people, the ones that keep the lights on, the ones that keep homes warm, and that includes staff as well as engineers. And a just transition must mean fairness for all, must mean job security, decent pay, skill development, gender equality, and a meaningful voice for workers to shape the future.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring, actually. David, over to you.
Hi, I'm Dave Douglas. A lot of people in the room know me by another name, Trigger. It's my little nickname. So David, my Sunday name's not the one I go by a lot of the time. I'm a fossil fuel worker in an environmental place. I'm a gas man. I've been doing it 25 years on, I think it's next Tuesday, we're getting a 25-year anniversary. My sort of role here today is I've created a workers' transition panel for the GMB in the Yorkshire and North East region, where we try to bring energy workers and workplaces that use a high amount of energy, glass, ceramics, and we just try to, rather than listen to the information that's provided to us in all the studies that's done, we're trying to cut through that by actually going to the front line of those workplaces and find out how that workplace works, what the plans are, what the problems are, and then get those workers in front of as many people as we possibly can, talking about the energy transition. There's two sort of groups in that. There's the energy workers, the ones who actually deliver the transition, who we all use. So we need to tap into their knowledge. And then we have the guys who are using the high amounts of energy, who are worried about their industries. We've got some great people. We've got, from welders to glass workers to gas workers to electric workers, and we try to bring them all together into the same space. And I think what we're really succeeding with in the panel is people who wouldn't normally engage with the union sort of structures, and they just do the workplace representation, the pay deals. They're actually coming out of the box, and they're actually able to speak very well and very professionally on topics that they're really well versed in. So they're experts in their field. It's taken a bit of time to get it moving because people feel like they're put in a room like this. They have to talk about policy, about things, so they start researching things. And all we want from them really is them to tell us what's happening in their workplace. And I think we're achieving that. We're just about to take it nationally. We've got a little bit of a project. Guy speaking on the stage later, Matt, who works at Hinkley Point. And we're going to do this nationally, so we're going to bring the big hitters, the big energy workers into the room and start talking about this debate nationally. And what we've been over the years, and Kat sort this out, Kat in the audience, we've been separated. So you've got the environmental sort of campaign this side, and then you've got the workers this side. And what we want to do is bring it together, because the only way we can fix it is if we do it together. So that's why we're here today.
I don't know if we're friends enough for me to call you Trigger at this point.
Yeah, you can call me Trigger.
I think for the purposes of this session, I'll call you David to just keep it some element of professionalism at least. Okay. Look, it's really interesting listening to what you've said, because I feel like we're all working in energy, and energy is very close to our hearts, but we're all looking at it in a very different way. So, Adam, listening to you, it's very much a sense of that real focus and concern about fuel poverty and how the perceptions around just transition is impacting people. And I will come back to you very shortly. Katrina, you've expressed concerns about workers in call centres and that aspect of the energy industry. And David, you've sort of given us that flavour of being in GMB, but working with energy-intensive industries where the cost of energy is obviously perhaps a concern, because processes and the way that we decarbonise some of these industries is fundamentally changing as well. This rewiring of the system, as we say. I mean, in the context of, and I'll put this question to all three of you, but just to understand where we're currently at the moment, and Adam, you already did speak to it briefly, but if there was a short statement around how do you think the people that you interact with feel about the transition right now, can you just give us a brief outline of what are those feelings, what are those sentiments that you see right now?
Yes, so we do crisis management. We don't do general kind of market support. So the usual response is, why are you talking to me about that?
Yeah.
Have you not heard what I've said? There's huge amounts of household energy debt, there's huge amounts of problems. So often it's that. So you have to earn the right to talk to them about the transition and how the transition may be there for them, may show up for them in various grants, and how it may make a difference. I think this is the fundamental challenge that we have. It's a rather nebulous concept for most people. It doesn't have traction. It doesn't connect into it, and it will be an issue that people in the energy sector will feel when they're trying to persuade people that the transition means something to them. But that's the first position. It needs to be something which isn't just a point of various interest. It's got to be something that brings direct kind of benefits. More generally, in the consumer world, there's appetite for the low carbon transition, but we'd be foolish if we think there's a real market demand for it.
Yeah.
We have to find a way of putting the cart before the horse. And the only way you can put we'll start that with the Warm Homes Plan that gets announced, which is a very complex beast. We'll get announced next month. But you have to learn how you can make it feel that something which has direct benefit to them in their industry, in their place of work, in their communities, and in their homes. Otherwise, it's an ethereal, theoretical notion that's too complex for people to get their heads around. What we would always say is a policy mistake. What Trigger says about, they're not always talking about policy, but policy mistake 101 is to assume that consumers are your policy actors. They will do what you think they should do because you created the policy framework. It's just not true. You have to start where people are. You have to answer their real questions. You've got to make them see the benefits and the trade-offs, and that's the only way you get them actively involved.
Thank you. David, if I'll come back to you now. So you mentioned that you're working with your role at the GMB, you're working with lots of different businesses who are concerned about what just transition means for their business. Are there any, what's the sort of feeling out there when you talk to people? Is it concern? Is it lack of information? What are there
if we use the Glassworks as an example, I mean, they've just been stung by the packaging tax as well. So the Glassworks are really on the knees. I mean, we've got three. I mean, I know that you know the area. We come from the sort of same part of Yorkshire. Well, you couldn't tell the two accents, but we've got three Glassworks in Nottingley at Cooper's area, and Craig was telling us last week that the amount of energy they use. So they use in one day what you would use domestically in 12 years. So 3 homes actually in 12 years. 3 homes, 12 years use of gas in one day. So when we're sort of talking to these businesses and these workers, the way I see it is we focus on the debate and we tend to make it an individual problem. We tend to say, right, you need to change the way you heat your home, and we need to change the way you drive your car. And then you talk to somebody from the Glassworks, and this it's all. And I'm not saying it's not important for people to change the way they work and where they live, but the astronomical difference between how much energy you're using for your individual issue to how much that workplace is using. I think we need to start focusing less on individual choices and more on how we sustain these workplaces. We had a ceramics debate yesterday. It was the same thing. I mean, the energy costs that they're paying out, it's just a phenomenal difference in what energy they're using, that the business is using compared to domestically. But and what I've been taught that these debates and round tables, and we always focus in on the domestic and the electric cars, the heat pumps, and how we heat our homes. And as much as it's important, we need to really focus on the high energy users, the high intensive energy users, because as much as we'd all like to change, it's going to take us, decades to make a dent in the domestic market, mainly due to cost, but also due to the fact we haven't got nationalised energy industries. We were talking about the gas transition yesterday, and it took 10 years to convert 14 million homes from town gas to natural gas, and we had 100,000 workers working in a nationalised energy company. Now, if we think we can go around and do a 2-3 day job in everybody's house, sporadically and fragmented, and change everybody's house to a heat pump, we're kidding ourselves. So if we talk about it in a way that that's the fix, it's just not the realities. And so when you're talking to the workers, you get that feeling of that, like, this isn't the right message. This adverts on the TV, shiny electric cars, as much as it's brilliant, as much as it is a change that we need. I've got an electric car and it's great to drive and I'm happy with that, but I don't think that's the way we're going to decarbonise and hit net zero. We need to talk to the people actually turning the bolts and turning the screws about how we get there realistically. As long as we're on the same page, ideologically, that's all.
I couldn't agree with you more. This is the sort of thing I actually get out of bed for. The thing, if I can just add something to what you described there, obviously if the cost of energy is increasing for these businesses, particularly those energy-intensive businesses, well, the cost ultimately has to come down to the product and the consumer, right? Yeah. And that's obviously increasing just the cost of living for everyone. Yeah. And I think that's the other part of the picture, right? We
saw that with the Russian invasion. I think gas went up 600%, and all of a sudden we're all paying more for everything because everything's underpinned by energy. Yeah. So it's a debate for everybody. Yeah.
I feel like, given that Sarah's not here, what I will just highlight is maybe I know a couple of policies that have been identified, and I would encourage anyone to look at the industrial strategy that the government recently published as well. So there's some points around the industrial strategy that speak to the cost for energy-intensive industries as well as energy-intense industries as well. So there are some things that the government is currently looking at, just to add that for people's information. Katrina, to come back to yourself and to think about where the people that you represent are and what they're feeling or the concerns there are, is there a way that you could perhaps capture that or express what that means?
Yeah, I'll try and do this as best I can. So I think they really need clarity. They feel that they're being left behind. So the way I would describe it is, at the moment, the transition to net zero, the race to net zero, the government are driving the bus. They're at the front of the bus. You've got your industry leaders and your business leaders at the front of the bus with them. Some are cautiously sitting up the back, whereas the rest of us, we're outside the bus, running, trying to catch up. And I feel that we need to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And that the workforce that I represent, they also need a voice at the table. You know, the same as what Trig said. 90% of people I represent, their roles relying on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
We've already been through 2 lots of redundancies within the last few years. There's a lot of pressure on the contact centre staff who've already gone through a huge transition from since COVID hit. You know, basically what happened was COVID hit and they were passed a laptop and a headset and told, go home and do your best.
Yeah.
And they did do their best, so much so that, you know, we now have a really successful hybrid home working model. But what's that going to look like when we move into net zero, when we transition into net zero? There's no clarity there for people, and that's what we really need at the moment.
Okay. Morning, Sarah. Thanks for joining. Basically, we've sort of been looking around different aspects of the energy system and trying to understand currently what our existing situation is. Whether it be redundancies, whether it be taking people along the journey and people who are in fuel poverty or fuel debt, thinking, oh, this just transition sounds great and everything, but what's it actually going to do for me? Through to the industrial aspect of the equation as well, which is, oh my gosh, okay, you want us to decarbonise our industries and convert to using electricity, but then the cost of electricity seems to be increasing. How is that going to affect my business? So there's been a lot of sort of discussion around that. I think one of the common themes is actually connecting to people who are going to be directly impacted here. That's part of that just transition story, but creating a narrative that they can actually get on board with and actually demonstrating to them what the benefits are going to be. Not just this is clean power, but how is it going to reduce my bills? How is it going to improve air pollution? Or what are the cells, or what are the jobs for the future, and all part of that. Sarah, do you want to jump in and give an opinion? I'm not sure. But
yeah, well, first of all, really, really sorry. Guess who got stuck outside in the massive queue this morning? I should have thought about that. It was nice coming in yesterday, today not so much. I think it is that issue about practical change that people will benefit from, and that is the thing we're missing out on at the moment. And if I give you the headline that in Scotland we've got 280,000 houses are vulnerable from flooding at the moment. That's not when the climate emergency gets worse. That's a real issue now. So there's issues like insurance for businesses, for homes. And 5 years ago, nobody would have thought about that. So there's something about a complete lack of planning ahead. Grangemouth, for example. Apparently people knew some time ago that, Ineos was thinking about what they were going to do. And you've got to plan ahead. So I think that's, for me, is the first thing. You need a plan. Because the climate emergency is on us, and we will have oil and gas for decades to come, so we will need those skilled workers, but we're also going to need even more to start doing the big offshore wind stuff. So we've been campaigning for an offshore passport. So if you work in oil and gas, you don't just have to pay for all the training, you actually get time off for the training as well, because you need to make that transition fair to the people that have got skills. Because if anyone's been to the North Sea before, it's a big commitment to go out and work out there. And oil and gas historically was 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. The renewables is going to be different. So it's not exactly the same jobs, but you need the well-paid, secure jobs out there. The other thing we've massively missed out on is manufacturing. So basically, None of the big turbines we are seeing installed in Scotland, which I'm a massive fan of, by the way, onshore and offshore, none of them are made in Scotland at all. We apparently have some grid components made in Scotland, but we're not doing the big opportunities that should have come from this. So that's the big industrial heavy lifting stuff. The other thing that you could be doing a lot more of is having a plan to make people's homes warmer in the first place. So they're not actually spending money on heat that is going out their doors, their windows, their walls, their roofs, all of that. And given that we have got 1 in 10 young people in Scotland are not in school, are not in college or university, and are not working, that is a massive potential workforce to give them opportunities in their own community with decent jobs. That also helps some of the smaller businesses. We've got loads of small businesses in Scotland who are struggling. And then you think about how our councils could be involved in this process. So for me, it's like there is so much missed opportunity here, because 5-10 years ago, people would have gone, what, the climate? What, global warming? That's not going to be bad, is it? And now people can see what's happening in southern Spain, Portugal, Greece, Italy, and in Scotland. I'm doing this from a Scottish perspective, but we now have not just the flooding I've talked about on a regular basis, all up our coasts, on our rivers, our floodplains. We've also got wildfires. And we had a wildfire that was half a mile from the Parliament. And we weren't sitting at the time, but it took out a huge amount of land. And our cities are going to be vulnerable as well. It's not just our rural areas. And what's happening? The Scottish Government is getting rid of firefighters. You couldn't make it up. So I think what's happening at the UK level is the start, but it's actually you need to deliver on the ground, and that's local authorities, getting a change of government in Scotland and working with the UK government. I could talk for hours. I realised I was very late, so I apologise.
That's all right.
And it's great to join the panel, thanks.
I feel that we have firmly established that things are not the best at the moment. And the title of the session is Bridging the Gap. So for me, I'm going to use my chair's prerogative to try and maybe push us towards a more positive vision, or maybe solution focus, or what do we actually need to do. And Sarah, I appreciate no turbines are being manufactured in Scotland at the moment. But I think in terms of trying to be more positive about what's happening in various industries, let's acknowledge the blades for turbines are being manufactured in Hull. There is a prospective blade factory in Leith that is in planning at the moment. There is a brand new multi-million-pound cable factory being built at the Port of Nig, and there's massive amounts of port infrastructure being redeveloped in Scotland as well as other parts of the country, and that's just from an energy perspective. So there's lots of positive things that are actually happening there. And I know you know that, but I'm going to try and get everyone fired up about what can we actually do to solve and bridge this divide. So, Adam, you've spoke very eloquently about taking people on that journey and what it means from a consumer perspective. What else can the government do? What can local government do?
Well, local government is a key point. So we're going to have a warm homes plan. Don't know what's exactly going to be in it, but there's going to be a focus on English devolution, as well as kind of devolved nation power. It's a challenge to those kind of strategic local authorities, but it's also a huge opportunity to start from where communities are and to think about how the low carbon transition gets represented in skills, in education, apprenticeships, in supply chain development. That's a huge opportunity to build that kind of market force, that supply chain for the future. Sarah's point is exactly right. The big immediate proximate opportunity that we have that government can push forward is the retrofit kind of revolution. Low carbon heating technology, but insulation as well. Supply chains in every local area with higher standards, with better enforcement. Actually, English can be a bit bold and maybe learn from other jurisdictions like the Scottish and get something that's more effective. But that's an opportunity to build markets, to train people, to get apprenticeships, and to deliver that kind of relationship between kind of people. So that's kind of hugely important as well. The challenge and opportunity at the same time is no one's pretending that low carbon transition is cheap. It's going to cost a lot of money. How you distribute those costs is hugely kind of important, and how people can see kind of the way in which people are paying for the low carbon transition is a big challenge, but it's also a bit of an opportunity. But start from where people are in their homes, in their communities, in their workplaces, get that regional devolution of spending and control kind of properly. But unless, I know you're looking for the positives, unless you underpin that with good levels of enforcement and surveillance about home insulation, and unless you require strategic local authorities to do it properly and build in skills and build in education and build in support and build in advice, you can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory very easily.
And if I can, the word cost has come up a couple of times, but I think maybe it's just a rephrasing of that word to investment, actually. You invest in improving the standard of someone's home.
But you're going to cut it.
It will cost money,
that's
of course.
absolutely right.
But the return on it is the fact that people will be using less energy, and in fact, it should be cheaper for them ultimately over a longer period, right?
There's theoretical system benefits which we need to leverage and get, and that's when you look at investment. But let's be honest, that money has to be recovered from people in different ways, whether it's high users, low users, consumers, or the exchequer. And unless we're honest about that, people know it's got to be paid for. So the politics of it is being able to understand what's happening, for what reasons, with what benefits, in what localities, and how you're going to recover the cost. I absolutely agree with you. It is investment, but if it all goes on the bill, then you've got a real challenge.
Of course.
Transition to pay.
Katrina, for the people that you represent as well, we talked about uncertainty. What would bridging the gap or bridging the divide be for you?
So I definitely believe real investment, honest leadership, community-led action would get us there, but our workforce need a voice at the table as well. I think historically they've not had a voice at this table, and they need a voice at the table. They are the ones that's going to be speaking to the consumers, speaking to customers who, as I said before, cannot afford their bill. How are they going to afford to pay £8,000 to £12,000 for a air source heat pump unit?
Yeah.
They're the ones that's going to be having that really difficult conversation, but at the same time, they're worried for their own role. They don't know what their own role is going to look like in 5-10 years' time. Okay. So we need to make sure that they have a voice at the table when you're talking about investment and policies and infrastructure. We need to hear from them as well, because these are the people that are going to be looking after the consumers.
Brilliant, thank you. David, to you.
For me, it's quite simple, really. we need the workers in the room when decisions are made. If I just take my industry, for example, heating engineer, in every property in this country, you have a custom-made heating system. It's not an appliance that you just install like a washing machine. It's a custom system for your house. There's not a one-size-fits-all in the transition. And in every workplace, in every home, you need the worker will go there. The construction worker at Hinkley Point will figure it out. The engineers will figure it out. The heating engineers will figure out how to heat your home. They'll figure out the best solution for you, and they will custom make whatever it is. The engineers will design this system, how it should work, whether it's the networks, the infrastructure, whatever. You need them there, because if you're just coming up with something that's just, we'll do this, then they need to give you the reality check. Because if we haven't got the reality check on it, we'll get it wrong. We'll get it wrong, and we'll just end up back where we are all the time. We'll just have a false start all the time. And I think, along with that, if we're putting public money into something, if we're providing a grant, we need to have conditions around it, around union recognition, around access rights, around workers' pay and conditions, about what the standard needs to be. And I think we need a stake in it. I think the public need a stake in it. I'm not talking about a full nationalisation, although I'd love to, but we need a stake in it. If a company's going to make money off the back of providing energy, perhaps we need some of that back, and perhaps we need that to give that to the local community who are sacrificing what they're sacrificing. If you have a nuclear power station on your doorstep, maybe you should pay a little bit less for your electricity, and maybe people will be on board with that. I know there's a guy from NGM, but we tried to do the hydrogen trial up there, and one of the big things we failed on with the hydrogen trial, and we need to start doing these trials, is we didn't engage properly with the public. We didn't engage properly with the workers. One of the crazy things I think is that we campaigners and MPs and councillors spend a load of money trying to get through doors, and speak to people and engage with people. And we've got a workforce that goes through people's doors every day, who are union members, Labour Party members, some of them, and we don't engage with them when they could actually be doing that bit of campaigning themselves. And I think that's where we fell down with the hydrogen trial. Definitely, we had customer-facing workers going in people's houses who could have been talking about this trial and know the benefits that we could potentially get from trialling this and what could happen with it. And we just didn't engage properly with people. So we've got to make sure we engage with the workers. The academic, we had somebody from City Liverpool College yesterday, I think, on a panel with us. So I think there's 4 points to it. There's the government MPs, there's the companies, the CEOs, and the people representing them, and then we've got the workers and the academic, the academies or whoever's representing them. And then once we've got those people in the room, we can have a grown-up conversation about how we actually move forward with it. And without having all those there, I think we're always going to fall down.
Thanks, David. Sarah, I'll pass to you for last reflections on how to bridge that gap, and then really interested that we can get some voices in from the audience as well. So if you've got any sort of thoughts or questions in your mind, be prepared to ask them.
Yeah, I think the retrofit revolution, I like that title. That's about making sure that everybody's home is going to be fit for purpose, because most of the homes that we've got need to be upgraded. And I think it picks up from the last points as well. You need to involve people locally. So I've seen what they call area-based schemes, very boring, but local authorities and housing associations come up with a plan. They get proper people who are trained installers, who are credible. It's going to be ongoing work. And I've visited a couple of places, even in my own city, and when they were doing it, it was a mix, because if you think about council houses being sold, there were people who were owning their own properties and going, oh, we're not doing that. Oh, why would we do that? And then they actually saw the change that was happening, and they started buying into it, and it makes their houses more valuable, but it also brings their bills down because they use less energy of whatever kind. And there's something about trust, reliability. The other thing that's a big opportunity for us is every council's now done an assessment on heat networks, and they've all got a strategy. But we have persuaded Edinburgh Council to look at the opportunity of the council owning the heat network and going into partnership. Next door to me, Midlothian, they've got a heat network, council-owned, partnership with Vattenfall. They've been building these things for decades. And there's something about the partnership, bringing people in, giving proper long-term jobs, making sure they're getting decent salaries, and you can use the community ownership or the council ownership as part of the leverage in that. The one thing I think we would do is GB Energy. I don't know if that's been mentioned so far. It could be leading in this in terms of technology, skills, working with the trade unions, local authorities, communities. The opportunities are massive, and when you look at some of our Nordic neighbours, they've had heat networks for decades, and they've actually decarbonised a lot of them. So there's a lot of opportunities here, and it's actually making it happen. So I think GB Energy, maybe a couple of National Wealth Fund projects to just get things off the ground, and incentivise, and then you get the supply chains, you get the manufacturing, and then you get decent long-term jobs. And opportunities for people in every community. Thank you, Sarah.
And I think it's just worth emphasising the point about some of the organisations that, again, the government has created since Labour has taken power, as it were. So, yeah, reflecting on Great British Energy and the good things that they've already implemented with regards to, I think, notably the solar for schools and hospitals, which is sort of been announced, and I think Ed even said yesterday at the SERA rally that they might be making a further announcement on that on Wednesday, so look forward to that. So, questions. I mean, you're all here on Monday morning at 9:30, so we know that this topic is very important to you. So I'm sure some of you have got some questions. Do I see any volunteers? And do we have a roaming mic? Gentleman here with the Sustainable Development Goals pin on.
Yeah, it got me in trouble yesterday with a couple of people who thought it was the World Economic Forum and I was part of the shadowy conspiracy. But my name's Bob Ward. I'm based at LSE, but I live in southwest England at the moment. And the fact remains that the consumer journey of getting installation of heat pumps and everything is still a complete nightmare. So the question is, so over and above the cost issue, just dealing with how do you get in quotes, how do you trust the information you're getting? So do you have any thoughts about how to deal with that issue. It's not something the market's going to sort out for itself. So it has to be a role for government here, I think, to help ensure that consumers get reliable, straightforward information to allow them to make the right decisions. So any thoughts from the panel about how to do that?
We'll go in rounds of three. So if panelists can have a think about that one, and there's a lady at the front here as well.
Lydia Merrill from UCU. I'm so pleased to hear Dave talk about working together across unions and listening to people in the workplace, because that seems to me to be a transformation of learning. So I'm just wondering what the panel thinks about how we can optimise the capacity building through further education, when further education is being so badly funded. And it's very difficult to keep staff in construction departments in further education. How can the government actually address that fact so that we're not having this absurd situation where courses are just simply too long for people to commit to them, or they're too far away from where the people want, and need the learning? And I'm talking about NEETs. I'm also talking about the NEETs parents. Young people's got parents who need to change their skills and upskill themselves. So I'm wondering what the panel thinks the government can do to join up education policy with the greening and the decarbonising and the cost policies.
Thank you for your question. Do we have a third question? The lady here.
I nipped out for a sec, so I'm sorry if someone's already asked this. So I'm from Hackney, and so we're a local authority, and I just wanted to add a little bit to the positivity. We are doing a huge amount to reduce people's bills by putting solar panels on council blocks of flats. What we are not doing is retrofitting our homes. I didn't say that outside here. We are retrofitting our homes, but not as much as we'd like to.
Yeah.
I think what I'd really like to hear from the panel is how can we fund that change? We are doing a huge amount on green skills. We're doing lots in FE colleges, and bringing along young people into into the right kind of industries. And we're providing energy advice. All the things you've said we are doing to the extent that we can afford to do them at the moment. But how do we fund that transition without match funding, which we don't have that money down the back of the sofa to match fund, and also and without having to compete with other local authorities for that funding?
Okay, thank you. Would anyone like to take the first question?
I'm happy to do that one, because your point is absolutely right. There is appetite. There's not great market demand. We haven't got markets that are driven on service or cost, and you haven't got an informed consumer base to drive it. So it is not a market that's ready to go. It is not shovel ready. Some of the big challenges are obviously information and advice. So not just digital information that you can see, but step by step. We do community hubs in Lancashire and the north, which is to take obviously stressed, low-income, fuel-poor households, but through all the different processes of, am I eligible for a grant? How do I get that grant? What information do I need? Have I got an EPC? How do I get an EPC? How do I get in touch with an installer? Can you be there for me when they come to view the property? Then the installation process, we can go wrong, and standards and enforcement isn't strong enough, and then there's no certainty about redress. So every aspect of making this mass market one that consumers would go into with confidence, especially even if they had the money, is currently absent. And you have to be able to structure that from the consumer point of view, rather than our ambition is this many heat pumps in a year. Unless you do that, you absolutely fail. The point about all local authorities are doing good things. We have some fantastic oases of good practice surrounded by deserts. The challenge is they haven't got the certainty of money. Certainly the market hasn't got the certainty of money, so you can't plan, so you don't get local authority and further education strategies about developing kind of income streams and courses, because you don't know how long you're going to have them for. The great opportunity of the Warm Homes Plan that government will be bringing in is this regional aspect, not local, regional, strategic, length of service. But my point is, you need to require, rather than just give money to GMCA or the GLA or whoever it be, or City of Liverpool, you need to have some requirements if you're going to have that money. If you're going to benefit from that money, what's your supply chain education strategy? If you haven't got one, you're not getting the money. And what is your information support consumer advice strategy? If you haven't got one, you're not getting the money. You've got to be a bit tough. This government's putting a huge amount of faith and optimism in the ability of regional authorities and hollowed out local authorities to deliver stuff. Now, you can go a lot wrong unless you put requirements and you capacity build and you give them the chance of being able to make it work over a period of time.
Thanks, Adam. David, maybe if I can come to you on some of those points as well, like maybe from the training and skills question.
Yeah, so the skills one's quite it's quite a nuanced question. We did an event up in Durham last week. It was a lot of talk of skills. Now, one of the worst things that always winds me up is the amount of money that people can earn. Fitting heat pumps. I think there was a quote. We're down in Westminster as well the other day. The installers don't realise they can earn £100,000 a year fitting heat pumps. And my comment to that was, well, if I can earn £100,000 a year fitting heat pumps, I won't be here talking to you. So that it's just nonsense. So you've got to cut through that. I mean, Tony, it's like in front of me, guy said you can earn £100,000 a year being a welder, and like, yeah, but you have to be a bloody good welder, and you have to be halfway down to the city of Atlantis because you're under the sea somewhere welding something if you're £100,000 a year. But so we've got to cut through that. The skills debate is a strange one because, take a gas engineer who wants to start working on hydrogen. He could probably learn that in 2-3 days. It's not a re-skilling, it's not a retraining. It's 99% of the job's exactly the same. You're just using a different gas. So that's an easy one, Same with the heat pumps. I mean, if you can install the boiler, you can pretty much install a heat pump. Once you've figured out how that appliance works. So a lot of the skills are very transferable. We've got a welder on the panel, actually. Matt, a great guy on the panel, actually. And he's just moved from, making gas manifolds in one company and moved to SERA Wind, and now he's working on the monopoles. And so he hasn't even retrained. He's just a welder. He's moved from one aspect to dealing with fossil fuels, and now he's in renewables. So we need to look at them opportunities. I think we need some type of agreement where we can almost guarantee a future for these people if they're training in that fossil fuel intense industry, that we will provide that when we sort of finish doing that we actually put them into a renewables place. But that skill is transferable. I don't think that really answers the question. Can I just add to that? And
I think one of the misconceptions sometimes, and by the way, a brilliant story from your colleague who's gone from creating gas manifolds to work. And for anyone who doesn't know what a monopole is, it's essentially when you see an offshore wind farm, it's one of those big steel cylinders that you literally hammer into the seabed and then you put your turbine on top of it. But just to highlight that amazing factory in Teesworks, up to £1 billion worth of investments gone into that, and it's going to be employing hundreds of people. So the jobs are being created, and I just wanted to get that little point across as well.
While we're on that, I mean, this will go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but these are one of the issues. Like, so SERA Wind, let's take them as an example, right? So £900 million we're giving them in loans. They're going to pay it back, right? So they've received that government funding. We asked for union access to that workplace. They wouldn't provide access. We weren't just access to it to speak to the workers, because they came to us highlighting health and safety issues, right, with the equipment they were using. They wouldn't provide us with access. We had to stand on the gates of that SERA Wind and give people leaflets, invite them to a local working men's club to listen to their issues. We recruited 190 members out of the 230 workforce into the GMB, and they still wouldn't give us recognition. We had to go to the CAC to get statutory recognition, and we've got recognition now. We got no help from anybody. We even highlighted it with DESNES. We got that amount of money that we gave them, and they would not recognise the union. I even got kicked out of a meeting there when I went up because they wouldn't let me in there to represent the workers. So we're trying to do it collectively. We're giving them all this money, and it's a great story that factory's there, and it's absolutely amazing when I've drove past it. But at the same time, they're not willing to work with the workers. It's a great story of how a union's got into a workplace, but It's not a great story from a Labour trade union left-wing point of view.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, no worries.
Sarah, I mean, just recognising some of the challenges that David and others have mentioned, is there a Scottish dimension? Is there a Scottish perspective that maybe you can illustrate or explain for us? Or
Well, we've got some good practice, like the solar on schools and hospitals. I was delighted to see, because in my city in Edinburgh, we've had a solar co-op for the last decade, and they're on their third investment round. And what that's meant is that all of our schools and our leisure centres, most of the leisure centres, are now getting a stream of income every year that goes to the school and the leisure centre. So that's money that then comes into the council. And so the cooperative movement has a lot to offer here, I think, in terms of shared investment, with good money coming back, but also the profits go into the public sector organisations that they're building the infrastructure on. So I think there's opportunities there. For us, the big offshore renewables, it's called ScotWind, and it has been a missed opportunity. We could have earned a lot more money for the state out of it that we could have then reinvested. And then, requirements on local sourcing. So you could, not make it 100% for everything, but you could up the bar so that it incentivised local production. So you're right, there is a project in Leith which would be Vestas. It would be big renewables construction, and that would transform the debate in Scotland as well. But it's up for planning, but you've got to make sure the investors come in. So there's something about the certainty and the confidence this is going to keep happening, and doing it both in the communities, but also some of the bigger picture stuff. And that is that pipeline of work. And, the fact that if you've got contracts for difference and ScotWind, you could actually say, we expect the companies to have the capacity for unions to be represented. Not a big deal. Shouldn't be impossible. So there's something about just weaving this into the infrastructure so that it actually happens. And definitely, I don't think Scotland's leading the way in terms of renewables building. It's just we're not making the most of those opportunities because the government's not thinking about the equity side of it.
Thank you, Sarah. And look, needless to say that none of these subjects are easy to fix. But I think you said before that the fact that we're all working together, the fact that we're having these conversations, gives me the hope and the promise that we can solve these things. We've got 10 minutes left. Conversations. Oh, we've got some questions over here. Thank you.
Hi, Harriet Butcher from Centrica. My question is for Sarah. The Heat in Buildings Bill is currently going through Scottish Parliament, but unlikely to go through before the elections next year. So will your party commit to doing something after the election if you are the party in power? And secondly, we've been talking about consumers. The Home Energy Scotland grant is much more generous than the boiler upgrade scheme. However, the emphasis is on the consumers to do the whole journey, as opposed to the boiler upgrade scheme, which is much easier for consumers in England and Wales as the installers do the EPCs and everything. And we see a lot of dropout, and there are now businesses and our competitors who are not installing heat pumps in Scotland. If you are in the next Scottish Government, will you commit to reforming the Home Energy Scotland scheme to make sure that consumers don't have to do everything?
Thanks, Sarah. Lady over here as well.
Hi, Emily from Offtech in UKIFTA. Sorry, my question was sort of mainly targeted at Sarah again. But how confident are you in the forthcoming Warm Homes plan that oil-heated off-grid communities are going to be recognised as more difficult to decarbonise, and that there'll be a carve-out allowing them to decarbonise in a way which suits their homes rather than things like electrification?
Thank you. And I think there's a last question here from the gentleman.
Yeah, I should talk to Harriet from Centrica. This is on the positive side. And this is, I'm David Saunders. I'm with SERA in Bristol. And this is based on, we've been researching since the feed-in tariff era. And we've designed a solar network for Bristol. with the idea that energy is shared within substation areas. So just because somebody's got room for solar and somebody doesn't mean that you don't have too much solar on one and you need the energy on the other. And we've been working with Centrica towards creating local solar networks. And it should deliver 30% savings on energy bills, and people get solar for free and cheaper energy. And we think of this as a gateway drug into retrofits. We'll be surveying people's homes as we put the solar on.
There's probably a better phrase for that, but like, I completely take the point. And I should have also said, look, Dave, you work for British Gas, right? And we were saying that that Katrina works for Centrica as well as. I should have said that I'm a former Centrica employee as well. Many years ago, I did the grad scheme and worked on the assets there. But yeah, I don't know why I needed to. There's a running theme here. So some pointed questions to Sarah around policies in Scotland, but then I'll open it up. So Sarah, over to you.
So should I admit I'm an ex-town planner?
If you want,
that can make me really unpopular.
This is a safe space, so yeah, feel free.
I think there is something about that planning ahead, though, and we've got this thing called the Heat and Buildings Bill in Scotland, and it has been a disaster because there wasn't enough consultation with businesses, with communities, and it just came up with a whole pile of targets. It was one of the Green MSPs. He was a minister at the time before he got sacked, and it just wasn't. It wasn't a proper plan, and it didn't think about the different parts of Scotland as been mentioned. We've got huge areas of Scotland that don't actually have access to gas because they're rural. So there's something about you need area plans in different communities and you need the certainty for businesses to invest. So it has been a total mess, and I'm on our Scottish policy forum for the Labour Party. So we are currently looking at what our plans are for the election. So I'm not going to reveal anything, but it is actually how you get that joined up decision making and giving people better choices. And we were doing quite well in Scotland on heat pumps, but actually we've gone back. And part of it is because there used to be a grant. So if you installed a solar panel and then you did your heat pump, which makes sense because the solar panel brings your electricity bills down, solar panels were cancelled. And you've just seen the supply chains are just really hit because we've actually got heat pumps being made in Scotland, but the pipeline of supply has just suddenly gone. So it's that thing about if you're doing this, you need to actually think ahead, talk to businesses, actually have a plan so people can actually invest and not create uncertainty in the market, and use local authorities, housing associations to help create that market as well when they're upgrading homes, which is a cost for local authorities, but a lot of our old homes need to be upgraded because you don't want to just demolish them all. We've got a problem, we're going to see a couple of tower blocks demolished because they're no longer fit for purpose. So these issues are going to hit local authorities all the time. So the government needs to be funding them fairer, and we haven't had that for years. So I think in terms of the heat and building bill, nobody knows what's happening with that at the moment because even the Scottish Government can't tell you. The issues about upgrades and consumers, that all needs to be brought together. And I think we go back to the earlier comments about you do need more of a plan because if people are going to build this kit and this infrastructure, they need to know that there's going to be a demand for it going forward. Yep. And that's where government can intervene, not to take it over, but to give clarity and to actually work with the sectors. And, you know, so some of it will be local authorities, some of it will be low-income communities getting help. Others is about persuading people that they're going to pay for it. It's going to improve their home, it's going to make it warmer, and it's going to create value in the home. And there's actually a lot of people who've lived in their homes for so long that they've got capital, but they can't access it. So green mortgages for existing homeowners. Yeah. There are lots of opportunities out there, but you need people like, we've now got, I think, 2 energy ministers in Scotland out of the Labour team. We had Michael Shanks, who's brilliant, but there's something about having that leadership across the country to bring people together and give a bit of clarity to business
you are
and jobs.
You are definitely well represented in DESNZ now. Katrina, any sort of other comments with regards to that, with that Scottish dimension that was mentioned?
Not specifically Scottish dimension. I just want to come back come back about the retraining and the re-education. So obviously the staff that I'm here to represent, they're also going to need upskilling, they're also going to need retraining. Who's going to pay for that? What their specific worry would be at the moment is, will it be more cost effective just to offshore, which is historically what's happened in the past? That's a question. That
Or
needs
even
answered.
artificial intelligence, right?
AI,
That's around the corner, right?
exactly. Yeah, we're going to be using a lot more AI. So, yeah, that's the worry. So who's going to pay for our contact centre staff to be reskilled, to be retrained, to be upskilled, to be where they need to be for the transition? So that's a question that I would like answered.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left. Adam, David, any sort of final reflections on those last questions?
I mean, the only thing I would say about the community energy schemes and local energy kind of plans is some of them are some of the most exciting community-based activities there are. There's a challenge to make sure they have a social as well as a carbon dimension. So you use those community assets and the low-income households get the benefit from it. How do you organise that? How do you make sure those voices are represented in those community energy schemes? But huge amounts of opportunity there. And just the point about those folk on legacy fossil fuel kind of boilers or difficult to heat homes, they're not going to be the focus of any program that comes out, but that either carve out or that support to enable they aren't entirely left behind and are then left with the costs of the transition. It's a really critical kind of issue which isn't getting enough attention at the moment.
Thank you, Adam. David, last.
Yeah, just as a final thought, I suppose, people are quite pessimistic about everything in terms of this subject, and I want to add a bit of optimism there. To be honest, I've been working around just transition since I was sort of plucked out of the GMB collective of British Gas after we had quite a serious dispute, which I won't go off talk about. But I started probably late 2021, started talking just transition with the TUC. And now we're at a position where we're sat in the tables at the Labour Party conference talking about it, and we weren't here before. And I think that's a real win. I think the work has actually been in front of everybody, telling them the realities of what the challenge is, rather than somebody just saying, "Oh, we're going to write a policy and we're going to put some gloss on it and send it out and put it on a website." The guys, and you know, if you just take where I'm from, Pontefract, you know, you could look down the Aire Valley and you could see 3-4 coal-fired power stations, couldn't you, back then? They're not there anymore because we transitioned away from them. There's going to be a big battery storage where Fairbury C was. So we are turning it. We are starting to move it, starting to change the way we do things. And I think there's a real sort of like from the fossil fuel workers, there seems to be this sort of think, well, they work in that industry, so they won't want that industry to go down. And I think that's the wrong. I think they are looking, they want to transition. There's a thing about the energy workers, you know, their jobs are at risk, and a lot of the time, you know, you're going to still have to heat your home somehow. The guys who heat your home with fossil fuels now are going to heat your home with electric or whatever you do, whatever we choose to do. So I think there's optimism there. I think it's a good news story. I just think we need to continue on this trajectory, get more voices into it, make it a bigger subject, rather than it just be the environmentalists over there and the fossil fuel workers over there. They need to come together, and we are doing. So it's a good news story. I just want to end on a positive, that's all.
Thank you very much, David. I was going to just add a couple of other positive statements as well. Look, as I said before, none of these subjects that we spoke about, and we have spoke about quite a large range of different aspects of just transition, are easy. But needless to say, with the right people in the room, having the right conversations and exploring these topics, then I feel confident that we'll be able to get through these things. Just in terms of, you know, reasons to be cheerful or further positive reasons, I think, look, what's really valuable is to recognise that there are so many positive stories that are already happening out there as well. These are not just the things that are happening tomorrow; these are the things that are happening today, and there's great examples that we can give you if you need. So look, let's stay positive. We know that we've got good messages to communicate to people. There's still a lot of work to do, but working all together, I'm sure we can. So thank you once again for coming, and if you show your appreciation to the panel in the normal way.